Welcome, everybody. And this is now Conchas y Café, Volume 6, Issue number 3 that we're going to be working on. So congratulations to all y'all that were part of the last group that got published. Issue number 2, Cult of Personality, is available now to be pre-ordered. The physical copies are still on their way, but you that got published in the last one will be getting your copies soon enough. For everyone that's new to the workshop series, welcome. And also for those of you that are returning, welcome as well. And for everybody that hopefully will join us after this first session, who might not know me, my name is Luis Antonio Pichardo, and I'm the founder and executive director of DSTL Arts. DSTL Arts is a nonprofit arts mentorship organization that inspires, teaches, and hires emerging artists from underserved communities. And yeah, we're here today to begin the newest series of Conchas y Café. So, as customary, I like to personally start off our workshop sessions with a quote. The quotes that we'll be reviewing, and if you didn't catch that, that's plural quotes. There's actually 3 different quotes that I think are pretty relevant to what we'll be talking about over the next 12 weeks or so, being that our theme for this series is unity. And, unity can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And obviously with our current political climate and everything, people are talking a lot about unity and bringing our country back together after being so divided for the last 4 years. But we'll be discussing unity in a lot of different forms. And today's lesson, for those of you that took a look at in advance of the handout, we'll actually be kind of talking about a way for us to start off on the right foot, I guess, in bringing about unity in our own vision. But to start us off, I have here a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. Most of you, I'm sure, have heard of Mahatma Gandhi, but those of you that might not know, he was born on October 2nd, 1869, and he passed away on January 30th in 1948. He was an Indian lawyer, an anti-colonial nationalist, and a political ethicist. En español les traducí aquí la cita que viene de Mahatma Gandhi. Él dijo, quizá nunca sabrás los resultados de tus acciones, pero si haces nada, jamás habrá resultados. In English, of course, he was quoted as saying, you may never know what results come of your actions, but if you do nothing, there will be no results. So what do y'all think? What does Mahatma Gandhi's quote here say to you? And I just copied it into our chat as well. So, Olivia, see you raised your hand.
I think what he's saying is that sometimes we feel like, well, what difference would I make? Why am I going to do this? Why am I going to speak up? It's just me, against this great injustice or whatever it is. If you see something wrong, but if we don't do anything, then we'll never know. Maybe if we do speak up, who knows? We might be the one that changes or start something moving. If we're not going to see the change, but we might start the change. If we don't do anything because we're like, oh, whatever. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to sort of interpret it, right? Like, if there's nothing that comes out of our actions, we may not know what comes of our actions, right? There's a whole realm of possibility. But if we do nothing, no action will come out of it, for sure. Anyone else have any interpretations from our quote for today? Let me also copy the Spanish version and paste it in our chat.
No, Mr. Lewis, I finally got in. I had the wrong number. And I can only add to what you were saying. It's very true that if we don't try something, we you'll never know if it could have meant anything. No matter how small, not to be shy, away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you were able to connect your audio, Miss Lois. And yeah, I think that's a good way to phrase what maybe what Olivia was saying and also what Mahatma Gandhi was saying. Kathy, I saw you raised your hand.
Thank you. The only thing I wanted to add is it for me, what resonates is it's being okay with not knowing the results. I think we're so driven to get to some kind of output and physical action and needing to have some kind of results now that his saying is keep doing what you're doing, follow your heart, follow what you know, what you value, what your principles are, but know that you may not have the end result like you want it to be. It could be something completely different and you may not be here to see it, but you're planting it. That's what came up.
Yeah, I like that. I also like that reminder of, us not always seeing like an instant gratification, right? There's always the possibility that our actions might have a result that happens further down the line, and we may not be able to know what it is in our own lifetime. I like that. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments about what Mahatma Gandhi is saying? Yeah. All right. Like I said, we got a couple of quotes that I want to present this time around because, the idea of unity, it's a big idea, right? There's so many different ways in which we could interpret that theme, and that's our responsibility, obviously, over the next several weeks. But I think that part of what creating unity, especially amongst groups of people, requires a certain level of education, right? A certain level of awareness. And I like what Robert Frost here wrote. Robert Frost, for those that might not be familiar, was born on the 26th of March in 1874, and he passed away on the 29th of January in 1963. He was an American poet, and he was a four-time Pulitzer Prize winner, and was also the poet laureate of Vermont, the state of Vermont, for a long time. And he was quoted as saying, "I am not a teacher, but an awakener." En español, traducí para ustedes lo que dice Robert Frost. Dice, "No soy maestro, sino un despertador." What does that mean for you? What do you think Robert Frost is trying to say with his quote? What is the difference really between being an educator, a teacher, and an awakener for you?
Well, here I am again, and I think it has a lot to do with experience of life. My grandfather, who had a fourth grade education, and he was a very strong man, and he would tell us to prepare for war in a time of peace. So wisdom has a lot to do with being able to, being encouraged to someone to go further, even if they have a high education, keep on keeping on. So you're able to give wisdom from a lower level that would help somebody to go on higher. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that if I kind of understood what you were saying, you were saying that it's not so much about the education level that a person achieves, but it's what they're able to do with their education. Is that kind of what I'm understanding you're saying?
Yeah, his wisdom came from experience, and well, I don't want to go on too long. There's some things that that he experienced. He died close to 100 years old, and so he was able to, from his experience, give wisdom to those that were, going forward. To how do you say, initiate encouragement and to give wise information, wisdom. I don't know.
Yeah.
Take it from there.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I kind of got what you were saying in the sense that, like,
He wasn't an educator. He wasn't a teacher.
yeah.
But he was able to input a positive idea into someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he could be inspiring, right, with his lived experiences. Right? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Miss Michelle, did you have a comment you'd like to make?
I do. I think the difference between teaching and awakening is that you're awakening somebody. That means you hopefully to motivate somebody, to motivate him or her to wake up, get up, rather than be dead in their works or dead in their situation, to continue and keep on keeping on.
Mm-hmm.
But however, that's a choice. Versus when you're taught, that means you want to learn, you're receptive to learn, and you choose to learn. Versus someone being dead. It's like Red Van Winkle, 20 years of being asleep, right? And then 20 years later, look what happens.
Yeah.
Red Van Winkle, past 20 years, was dead. Well, he appeared to be dead because he slept for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm thinking about with awakening versus teaching, because he could have been taught in the last 2 decades by not being awake. He didn't want to be taught. He was not awakened at all. That's my perception.
Yeah. And I think, like, kind of what you're saying is like Rip Van Winkle, a person that is asleep for a long time, right? They're like metaphorically cut off from the world, right? Whereas a person that is awakened, they might be like a person that's, I don't know, like maybe they're now, I don't know, feeling like they can do something, right? They can take action on whatever it is that they're learning. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments about what Robert Frost said, or maybe how Robert Frost's quote, "I am not a teacher but an awakener," maybe also relates to Mahatma Gandhi's quote that we covered at the beginning, which is, "You may never know what results come of your actions, but if you do nothing, there will be no results." You all seeing a connection yet?
Well, there's a saying that I remember hearing, that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So if you don't open your mouth, you're not going to learn anything. And it doesn't mean mouth as eating food. It could be fed for spiritual food, soul food from eating, as well as your spirit, your emotional soul, your emotions, your anything will be fed in those ways. In regards to that. And those quotes may correlate with that, what I just said, because you don't say anything, you don't do anything, you can't learn anything but yourself in the mirror. All
right. I like that phrase, right? With what is it? Closed mouth won't be fed.
Does not get fed.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I could definitely see how you're tying those two quotes together.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have any last comments here?
I wonder if, like, teaching, well, the idea of teaching or awakening has to do with helping people to realize their own power.
Yeah.
So more of an awakening,
Yeah. I think I want to ask that question, right? What does it mean to awaken someone? For you, what does that entail?
Would that be made aware, become aware to something unknown? You have an awakening. They say sometimes there's a rude awakening. Sometimes something terrible has to happen in order for you to get a grip on something that's necessary.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, at least that's how I take the quote, right? Like, I am not a teacher, but an awakener. As in, like, I might teach you all, different skills in creative writing, but, I would rather, I hope that I awaken your spirit, right? I awaken you as the writer so that you can, fulfill your duties as a writer. I think that's kind of what Robert Frost is going for. But
that's perfect. That's perfect. even though you gave us a chance, because further down in the reading it says, you want to be a poet, blah, 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 blah. You can be this one, you can be that one, you can be this, you're awakening us to open up our horizon, to step out of the box, out of complacency. So that was a good one. That's for you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Jess, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I only heard the last part, but not the last part, but I guess when I heard where she said it's a rude awakening, I was thinking about that, then I was thinking about what you said, and I feel like when I think of the word awake, well, lately, for me anyways, it's more like just a reminder that you woke up, like you're alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that one word pretty much identifies in the morning, if you happen to work in the morning or wake up in the morning, so people wake up at night.
Mm-hmm.
If your day starts, you're woke. Like, what are you going to go into this day learning?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to go learning, or are you going to be educated on what you're supposed to do for the day? Because all you got is that you're awoke. You like fucking see that, like you're awoke, like you're alive, you know? So I think that sometimes after, I don't know, just me personally speaking, just like, right, we're all of a particular age, like after living, you have those moments where you have to you're like, wait a minute, I'm alive, I have more control, or I have some control over what these next 24 hours look like.
Yeah. I like that.
You know how in the cartoons where a light bulb comes up always in my head? All of a sudden.
I think that's the simplicity of he's trying to say, is like the fact that you woke up, that's pretty much all the light bulb you need.
It can be, yeah.
I mean, that's why I did it. Like,
5 stars.
woohoo! All right, guys, I'm out. I'm just kidding. What did I do?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. I think that, and it's interesting that Jessica said specifically the word of being alive, because Felicia in our chat also put in there that it's enlivening, right? It's a person that is now maybe open to a different way of life, right? Different lens of understanding, which I think is the power that we all have as poets, and it's especially true when we're talking about, the impact that we can have, or the results of our actions, right? Our actions, us being writers and us writing our ideas and thoughts in a way that makes people feel more woke, that can definitely be a way of uniting people, right? We unite them under one banner. And I think that that's sort of what our last quote here is getting at, right? Our last quote comes from Malala Yousafzai. For those that don't know Malala was born on the 12th of July in 1997, and she is a Pakistani activist for female education, and also the youngest Nobel Prize laureate. And Malala, lived through a lot of difficult things in her life. So I think that as an individual, she is very, very inspiring. But maybe the insight that she's saying here isn't necessarily a new one, right? But it's still a very, very valid one, and one that we need to, I think, be reminded of all the time. One child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world. Right? I mean, think about what she's saying here, and think about what Malala has gone through, for those of you that are familiar with her story, right? How true is that statement? Is it really true that, one child, one teacher, one book, or one pen can change the world? I see some head nods.
I think so.
Yeah. Tell me how. How do you see that happening? Or do you have an example of that happening?
I do.
Yeah.
The poem by Amanda Gorman during the presidential inauguration is a beautiful example of that. Is for what she wrote and what she said and how she read her poem.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw her reading that, I thought about Maya Angelou when she read her poem for President Obama. So I thought, that's one example, because now we have a presidency in which hopefully, I'm looking forward to unity in this nation for healing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she wrote was beautiful, what she wrote, and inspiring. And that's what I think in regards to that. And in regards to the young lady who you spoke about, Malala, I hope I'm saying her name right, what she went through to where she is now, they're both are young women who are both internationally known for their craft of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just beautiful women. And I'm glad that these two women are being introduced to our writing, because it's important, because this is the future for us as writers, and to keep on keeping on, And also, what you said today has also told me that time waits for no one, and that tomorrow's not promised, because we don't know. And then there's also a saying that we know lately called "stay woke."
Mm-hmm.
That's been happening, stay woke for a while now. So all these things are popping in my head in regards to what you're saying as well.
Yeah.
We must stay woke in this nation, in our neighborhoods, in our country, in our cornerstones, and anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We must. We have to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like, ultimately, I think that's what I want to really impart right now, is that idea of being woke, right? There's a power to being woke, but it's not something that comes naturally, right? It's something that we have to actually be actively engaged in doing. That's why I wanted to start off with the quote from Gandhi, right? The Gandhi quote, I think, really speaks to where we're hopefully headed in this lesson, right? We don't know always what the results of our actions will be, but if we do nothing, nothing will come. Nothing will happen. And what Malala is reminding us is that, our actions can have a broader impact on this world. Jess, I saw you unmute yourself.
Because I talk myself out of saying it, and then I'm like, should I say that? No. Well, I'm going to go the opposite effect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one thing, and I don't mean to, I hardly bring up politics, but thanks, Michelle, you brought it up. So. And I really don't, unless I feel like I can add some value. Other than that, I just listen. But I actually can add some value here. So I think that speaks to the situation, I think, as a country where we're at. It's been one child's perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the Anglo-American perspective. That just happens to be the perspective that it's been, right? That's not a thing. That's just the perspective that one child has from the one teachers had that gave them that perspective, right? That one pen wrote, or 12 people, whatever, wrote, that we've all been studying as a nation. It's been one person's perspective with African American, Japanese American, Mexican American, Lebanese American, Persian Americans, right? That we've been using. So it's we've been using one book, one pen, one perspective since the inception of the country. So, which is why when I don't even remember who was president. I don't even know who's president now. I'll be very honest with you, but I do vote, so I put time was him. And I hope you're voting in your local elections, which is March 2nd. I already did vote by mail for that. Those are very important, as important. But one thing I appreciated about the last presidency was it allowed other people got a pen. Other people wrote a perspective. Other people picked their narrative, right? It offered an opportunity to right, what are we studying as a country, what we are, who we are, where we came from. As a country, what on this screen right here, right? So I think one child, one pen can change the world for good or bad. Is my point. I guess in all of that. So.
No, and I very much appreciate your point, because you're right. Like, there is always one particular perspective that we've been taught from early childhood, right? And so it's really important that we open ourselves up to multiple perspectives. We need to see other people's visions for the world.
And yeah, like, it was really cool. Like, my son, he came home today, talked about Harriet Tubman, which I thought was cool. But then I also thought, wait a minute, when I was in third grade, that's who I was learning about. Like, there's been some pretty radical things since then presented by African American community that is very much still relevant. I'm not just still trying to describe the important work that she did, but like, that can't be the only perception my son sees so many hundreds of years ago, right? Right. Can we see, like, in the last 50 years, this is how African Americans have improved this our country. The last 15 years, this is how Mexican Americans, Japanese, whatever, improved our country. Yeah. You got to get out of that one. We're all on that. I can't say we all are, but kids are being educated by the same book, by that same pen, by that same person. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the same. Yeah, it's the same narrative that keeps on getting told over and over again, for sure. I mean, characters and everything. When this country, like, we have some major talent here of all different colors. Yeah, absolutely. I saw Abraham raised his hand, and then Kathy. Abraham, what you want to say now?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Kind of reminds me how governments who want to control people or are super tight, let's say that, they go after the teachers first, because they know they are the people who awaken people to know what's going on, and also to teach them about the past, like she was talking about. That's one of the tools we have to know what to do next, because we know the past, how other people have overcome their situation. So that's the power of teachers, I say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's really a value to understanding our history, right, and telling the stories of the people from our past. Those that were like excellent examples of our community. That is important, for sure. But we do want to make sure that we have all narratives included in that, right? Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you. I got ignited. I was like, whoa, a lot of information coming. The first thing I'm noticing is, I think these quotes are layering in, right? So we're seeing the igniting, the teacher that's awakening, and then we're seeing the child with the pen, and one book, one pen can change the world. For me, the book and the pen translate to critical thinking. So when you give that gift of, here, I'm going to teach you how to read, I'm going to teach you how to write, and then I'm going to teach you how to think, and now take it away, do what you will with it. We're able to get those different perspectives, but we still have people in the world that haven't been taught to read. And so that's where the quote is coming from. Is like, okay, turn the light on. So reading, writing, basics, and then expand that perception. I think that we have given full narrative in this country, and we have the opportunity. But again, I think with the No Child Left Behind, let's make sure everybody's getting the basics so that we can expand perception. That was what came to me. I was like, whoa, a lot of stuff.
For sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that are happening here. I mean, to begin with, we normally start off with just one quote, right? But today we have 3 different quotes that we're reviewing. And Kathy's on point, right? These are layering. I purposely chose these to kind of layer some ideas in here, because they're all very relevant, and they all have to do with ultimately the technique that I'm gonna review with you guys. But basically, I think that if we're going to talk about unity, right, which is, again, the theme overall that we're going to be covering for the next 9 to 12 weeks, right? Unity is there's ways in which we can achieve unity, but I don't think that we can find unity in only one narrative, in only telling one side of the story. And also, we have to be reminded that each one of us plays a role in that, right? Each one of us has to take action, or else there will be no way that we can be woke, right? To be a teacher is to be an awakener, in the sense that, you know, you're teaching people essential skills that they need to basically overcome whatever it is that they may not be able to overcome, or, you know, whatever other idea you might want to throw in there. But ultimately, I think that it's important that we remember that as writers, you know, our pen is mightier than that sword. You know, we can tell our individual story, like what Felicia was saying about, you know, Anne Frank, and Anne Frank being a great example of how someone's words can, you know, change people's perspectives about, you know, the lives that a certain group of people lived, you know. But I think that to Jessica's point about just having that one perspective, you know, if all of us only knew about Jewish people through what happened in the Holocaust, right? Schools teach, what is it, Night by Elie Wiesel and The Diary of Anne Frank. You know, those two books are basically the only books that teach about the Holocaust. But, you know, there were more Holocausts than just the Jewish Holocaust of World War II. You know, I didn't really learn about the Armenian Holocaust, for example, until, you know, I moved to LA. And that's because I happened to meet Armenian people that knew enough about their history to learn, you know. So, and that's the first Holocaust of the 20th century. There's been a lot of other Holocausts that have happened since World War II as well. I mean, there's been, you know, all sorts of different types of genocide that have happened across the world over our history as a human race that people don't know anything about. So to sort of go back to what Kathy was saying, you know, once you learn the skills, right? Once you learn how to tell your story, you know, once you are able to present the vision that you want to present, you know, then you can start changing narratives. You know, you as a writer, whatever you write will have an impact. And so having that sort of awareness, that foresight, right, you can be more deliberate in the things and the messages that you want to say. And so being deliberate about the way you write, that's what we're really going to get into today. But before we do that, you know, I want to also say, like, it's like a logistical thing. I changed my layout on the screen, so it's on the spotlight layout. I don't get to see everybody in you know, their little tiles here. So if you guys are raising your hands, just by raising your hand, I might not be able to see you if you have a comment. So try to use the little raise hand button on the screen, or just simply unmute yourself and speak. You guys are always welcome to you know, chime in at any time. But if you do have a lot of background noise, just please leave your microphone on mute, so that way you're not disrupting too much from the audio. So let's continue on. Today we're going to cover something that I've actually talked about before, but it's been a while since we covered this particular topic. I hope everybody can see the screen. But today's lesson is on the manifesto. Right? And like I said, we've talked about the manifesto before. I've taught this lesson before, but I'm, you know, hoping that this will be a great way for us to kick off our theme of unity. Aquí en español también les traducí lo que significa un manifiesto. Un manifiesto es una obra escrita declarando públicamente las intenciones, motivos o opiniones de su autor, típicamente político o artístico en uso, pero puede presentar la postura del individual sobre la vida. That last part of the actual definition of manifesto is what I think is really important for us to understand. Right? But it is a written statement declaring publicly the intentions, motives, or views of its issuer. Right? That's kind of like the basic mechanics. And yes, they're often political or artistic in nature, but they may present an individual's life stance. I think it's important for us to understand that, right? It's the individual's life stance, which might mean that they have to acknowledge certain things about, their past or their position in life. As you see here, a manifesto usually accepts a previously published opinion or public consensus, right? Now, the idea of accepting it does not mean that they take it as the only way to live, right? Manifestos, a lot of times when we think of manifestos, we think of them as these political tools or these things that are meant to be subversive. They're not always necessarily subversive as they are educational, right? They can promote a new idea with prescriptive notions and or clearly defined goals for carrying out the changes the author believes should be made, right? Prescriptive notions, this phrase in particular, I want to call out because it may not be something that you hear every day. What is a prescriptive notion? For all of you in the group, right? What does that mean for you, a prescriptive notion?
Something designed for you?
Yeah, something designed for you. I like that. Think of a prescription, right? The doctor gives you a prescription to combat an illness. Well, a prescriptive notion is kind of like an idea that hopefully addresses the issue that's being addressed. Jess, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that's like the key word. It's hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, right.
Almost.
Yeah. But again, to continue on, it will either give you these hopeful goals, right? These hopeful ways in which a particular issue might be addressed, or it'll clearly define goals for carrying out the changes that the author believes should be made, right? So there's a couple of different things that manifestos will do. And I tried to really, in reading manifestos over many years, when I was in college and even in preparing for this lesson, I really tried to think about, what are the basic structures of manifestos, right? If you were to sit down and write a manifesto, what would you need to know about writing manifestos? Well, I broke it down into these 4 basic components, right? Many manifestos will follow this structure. They'll state the intention of the manifesto, right? So it almost always will start off with telling us why the manifesto is being written. Then it'll express an opinion about the topic that's being addressed. So those two kind of go hand in hand, right? It'll say, this manifesto is for X. And this is my idea, or these are my thoughts on X. This is what I, as the author, think are good or bad about the topic. Then it'll offer a vision for a new, improved world, or a new, an improved manner of living, or a new and improved system. The most famous manifesto out there is the one written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, right? The Communist Manifesto. When most people think of the Communist Manifesto, they think about it as being like this sort of evil or diabolical thing that takes all religion away from people and takes all private property away from wealthy people and gives it all back to the poor. That's not necessarily true, right? It actually talks about ways in which we can empower people and create a new system for living that is equitable. That's why the Communist Manifesto still resonates with so many people today. But there's also things like the Zapatista Manifesto, which is really focused on, the worker that works the lands should be the one to own the lands. So it has components of the Communist Manifesto, but with a more indigenous tone to it, in honoring the land as part of our whole world ecosystem, right? So, it's about a way of life more than anything. So that's the third component. But lastly, and I think this is really what makes a manifesto something that is an actual manifesto versus just being some opinion piece. right? Manifestos will identify the actions that we need to take to achieve the vision that the author is presenting. So those are the four components. Those are the four primary components of a manifesto. What do y'all think? Does anybody have any opinion about what I just presented? Or any questions about what I just presented?
Can you show the, I wanted to see number 4 again because I was listening, but I wanted to read it.
Yeah, sure.
Well, while she's reading, I'm going to put this little input in. It's like telling someone, your intentions of showing them how to, or advising them on how to make a good old cake. And then you give them go for it. You tell them, your intention is to have a beautiful cake and for it to turn out the way that they desire for it to turn out. And then show them or tell them how it is to be done and so on and so forth. So to me, it's a road back to life for benefit for achievement. We all had those particular steps and how we address them in our writing is coming from our understanding or preparation. There you go.
I like that. I like how, basically you turned a manifesto into a recipe. Right? And in a lot of ways, I think that that's right. Like a manifesto in some ways could almost be like a recipe. It'll outline, the ways in which we can create a new world. But, if you turn it into a recipe, it might make it more fun for people. It might actually make it something that people want to engage in and actually do. I like that. I dig it. Any other thoughts or ideas on how to interpret a manifesto? I see a hand raised from Kathy.
Hey, I just wanted to share a little bit of my background. So I work in technology, software development, and the first thing that came up as you said manifesto was the Agile Manifesto. And basically a group of programmers came together and said, we don't like the way we're developing software. We're going to write a manifesto and we're going to develop software this way. And they said, this is what we're going to value and this is how we're going to do it. And at first it was very combative. I remember when we first started embracing agile technology, everyone was like, oh, that's so controversial. That's so controversial. But now we're embracing it and we're taking it in and we're applying these principles and these values 12 years later, 20 years later. It's like the whole thing. So it's pretty fun. This is not a political manifesto, but it definitely revolutionized the way we create software. I thought it was fun.
That's interesting too, that you mentioned how, this manifesto came out almost 20 years ago, right? Or maybe 12 years ago? And now, many, many years later, people are actually starting to accept it and integrate it into what they do. Or like Jeremy, in the chat there, speaking of manifestos as recipe, reminding him of the Anarchist Cookbook. If you think about how long it's taken for these ideas of equity and inclusion to become part of our everyday life, these were things that this in the 70s people were talking about, right? The Black Panther Party, they were the ones that started programs that are being used today, right? Like the after school and before school breakfast and lunch programs, or the pre-K programs that most schools use now. Those were actually started by the Black Panther Party, who had a manifesto that was inspired by the Communist Manifesto, right? So we're talking about, almost 100 years after the Communist Manifesto was written. Only now in our everyday society are people actually starting to incorporate some of those concepts. Kind of like what we were saying, right? About, in the quotes, right? You may not live to see the results of your actions, but if you take no actions, nothing will happen, right? So think about that. And I'm glad that Ani is feeling like this is what she needed. Because guess what? That's what y'all gonna do today. Y'all are gonna, this week, you guys are gonna write manifestos. But to give an example of a manifesto, obviously I have something for you guys. Viva la revolución, indeed. So to give an example though, because I wouldn't be doing a manifesto justice if I didn't give one, I have here for you something that we have covered in the past and that I personally always find actually very inspiring. Now, this is an excerpt. It's not the full-length poetry as Insurgent Art by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. But I think that what I cut out right here to present to you guys is a pretty good example of what I was saying. Now, remember, these are the 4 basic things that you'll find in most manifestos, right? Declaran la intención, expresan una opinión, ofrecen una visión y identifica las acciones que uno debe de tomar, right? So it will state the intention of the manifesto. This upcoming poem will also express an opinion about what it's right, what the topic is. It also offers for us a vision for, this new world order, right? This new way of approaching poetry. And it also identifies actions that you as the audience member should take in order for this vision that Lawrence Ferlinghetti is presenting us to become a reality. So again, this is Poetry as Insurgent Art. It is an excerpt. It's not the full-length thing. And it's written by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And if anybody doesn't know who Lawrence Ferlinghetti is, he's actually still alive. He was born on the 24th of March in the year 1919. He's an American poet, painter, and social activist, and also the co-founder of City Lights, booksellers, and publishers. And if you guys didn't catch it, all right, he was born in 1919. This March, he turns 101 years old. That's pretty, I think, spectacular. And definitely something that I don't know, just for me, sort of gives this poem even a little bit more meaning reading it now.
Luis, we got to see him at the book fair
many
years ago. Yeah,
nice.
That's how I heard about him, and then I thought it was pretty cool. I'm done.
Very cool. So I'm getting tired of hearing my voice. Does somebody want to, take on the challenge of performing Mr. Ferlinghetti's poem for us? And I can't see your hands, so whoever jumps in first, you guys you get to read it for us. Anybody? Who wants to give it a shot?
Read it.
All right, David, go for it. I'll just scroll along.
Okay, Poetry as Insurgent Art excerpt. I signal you through flames. The North Pole is not where it used to be. Manifest destiny is no longer manifest. Civilization self-destructs. Nemesis is knocking at the door. What are poets for in such an age? What is the use of poetry? The printing press made poetry so silent it lost its songs. Make it sing again. If you would be a poet, create works capable of answering the challenge of apocalyptic times, even if it means sounding apocalyptic. You are Whitman, you are Poe, you are Mark Twain, you are Emily Dickinson, and St. Vincent Millay. You are Neruda and Mayakovsky and Pasolini. You are an American or not an American or a non-American. You can conquer the conquerors with words. If you would be a poet, write living newspapers. Be a reporter from outer space, filling dispatches to some supreme managing editor who believes in full disclosure and has low tolerance for bullshit. If you would be a poet, experiment with all manner of poetics, erotic broken grammars, ecstatic religions, heathen outpouring, speaking in tongues, bombast public speech, automatic scribbling, surreal sensings, stream of consciousness, found sounds, rant and raves, to create your own limbic, your own underlying voice, your voice. If you call yourself poet, don't just sit there. Poetry is not a sedentary occupation, not a take your seat practice. Stand up and let them have it. Have wide-angle vision. Each look a world glance. Express the vast clarity of the outside world, the sun that sees us all, the moon that strews its shadow on us, quiet garden ponds, willows where the hidden thrush sings, dust falling along the river run, and the great spaces that open out upon the sea, high tide and the heron's call. And the people, yes, all around the earth speaking babel tongues, give voice to them all. You must decide if bird cries or cries of ecstasy or cries of despair, by which you will know if you are a tragic or a lyric poet. If you would be a poet, discover a new way for mortals to inhabit the earth. If you would be a poet, invent a new language anyone can understand. If you would be a poet, speak new truths that the world can't deny. If you would be a poet, strive to transcribe the consciousness of the race through art. Create order out of the chaos of living. Make it new news, right beyond time. Reinvent the idea of truth. Reinvent the idea of beauty. In the first light, wax poetic. In the night, wax tragic. Listen to the lifts of leaves and the ripple of rain.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. You're getting a nice round of
Luis,
applause.
how long is this in its full
In its full form?
full form?
Well, by itself, it's published as a little chapbook. It's the version that I have is a little miniature chapbook, like about maybe that big. It's like maybe a 3 by 5 inch booklet, and it's considered an epic poem. It's about, I want to say, the little booklet itself is something like 89, 90 pages or something like that. So written out like on a regular 8.5 by 11, I'm assuming that it's probably like about maybe half that, like 40 to 50 pages long. So yeah, it's a longer poem. And I would actually argue that this is more of a prose poem than it is anything else, but it still works as a manifesto. And I think that's what Lawrence Ferlinghetti's intentions were when he wrote it. And I'm glad that Miss Luce remembers it, and that it inspired her. I hope it inspires you guys. But overall, what do you all think? And thank you, David, for really putting some life into that poem for us. But yeah, what do you guys think? What do you guys think of what we just read?
Well, here I go again. First, I want to say bravo to that reading. At the end, he really got into it. Like I said, it's like standing on a bandwagon. Make your voice heard with a directional impulse. Just don't talk a lot of mess just to be talking. But I mean, go in there with gusto and a plan of direction. And I don't want to get on the soap opera, but that's it.
No, yeah, and I think soapboxing is part of what makes a manifesto a manifesto. And I'm glad that you found it empowering and inspirational. San Juanita in the chat is sharing that, and I think it sounds like Miss Lois found it inspirational too. I saw that Abraham raised his hand. What's up, Abraham?
Hi. Well, it's not something that just saying I will do this, or this is my view, or this is what I'm gonna do next. It also calls for action for other people, not just the writer, because it goes along with you are and you. So it's basically calling for others to follow these steps, because he does have a lot of steps along the way. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Mao, saw you raised your hand.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think also, I didn't think about this the first time I heard this around, but I think it also addresses like the author's own limitations as to how much they have influence of, and just recognizing that, you know, poetry is something as a people is something we should all do, knowing that one person is never enough. It's like a community, a voice of a generation, many people to kind of put in their voice and their truth into the mix in order to make change happen.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that you brought that out, man, because I mean that's very very true, right? We have our own limitations as individuals, right? We can only be strong. We can only make change as a group. You know, that's why again, you know, this is about unity. You know, we're talking about unity and creating unity. Jess, I saw that you raised your hand.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about it when you were reading it, and like the part of unity, and then the other people like jumping and seeing how he had. I think what was clever about what he wrote is he wrote so many different examples. I think or not examples, rather options or actions that can be done as a poet. So some people might not get inspired by one of the lines he said, but it was the next line, like that perked up my ears, right? And then the next two lines are in, but then he said something and I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I think just giving this thing like, okay, obviously you don't know everything, but you know something, you know, write about it, because hopefully the other 5 people write about what they're thinking and we cover all bases. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the whole thing of unity, just the fact that everybody thinks so differently is in fact unites us because we all think differently.
Yeah. I like that, and I like that you're acknowledging, right, that maybe one thing that he said didn't speak to you, but you know the other one did, right? And then you know that could have the same effect with people. Structurally, did anybody have anything that they noticed about the structure of the excerpt? For you guys, now that I talked about what a manifesto is, did you see the structure of a manifesto within what we were reading?
I did want to say something. I appreciate it. I liked it when he said, if you would be a poet experiment with all manner of poetics, erotic broken grammars, ecstatic religions. I like the part where he says erotic broken grammars because I'm really not good at grammar. So that before I started coming to this class, I really didn't write a lot because I worried about that. And I ended up, you know, I spell half the things wrong and don't do anything right. Not right, but a lot of stuff is grammatically super wrong. Like this class, like that's exactly, I guess that's so weird that it did that for me, because I had to learn to just be like, okay, Jessica, like big deal, you can't write. That's why that's cool you have this teacher, because I guess he's gonna help you learn that or something, you know? This is before I knew you, Luis, you know? I was like, I just get to turn it in and he corrects it. Great. So, but I mean, like, if I didn't do that, that's probably what spoke to me, actually. That's probably why I copied it right now of that, because that's when I heard it. That got me out of my way to like be a poet. You know?
I dig that. I like how you phrased it too. It got you out of your own way. I think that's a great way of phrasing that. You know, not to like say that you know I'm like a great teacher, but ultimately, you know, that is what Robert Frost was saying in the quote that we were reading from him, right? I'm not a teacher. I'm an awakener. You know, I'm not here to tell you what to think or how to think. I'm here to show you that you have the power to think. I'm here to show you that you're already a poet and that you are poeting every day without you realizing it, you know? And thank you, Mauricio, for thinking that I am a great teacher too. But like, that's not my goal, right? That's not my reason for doing what I'm doing. I'm doing what I'm doing because I want to empower you. And I want you now to take that and pass it on, right? So I want you to take what you feel in coming to this workshop series, and I want you to share it. I want y'all to be like, you know, spreading the gospel of DSTL Arts, and you know, spreading the word of the word. And this is one way to do it, right? This is an example of how to do it. So going back to the poem and speaking about the structure of it, right? Because I do want to make sure that we do recognize what I was saying about manifestos. Remember, most manifestos follow this basic structure, right? They start by telling us the intentions of it. Then they'll express an opinion about the topic that they're addressing. Then it'll offer a vision for a new and improved world, manner of living, or a system. Then it identifies the actions that we need to take to achieve the vision, right? The call to action, as in like giving us a very clear and defined way of achieving this vision, that is what makes this a manifesto, right? So here, looking at it, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, obviously being a poet, he's gonna be like stating his intentions in a way that are maybe more poetic, right? He's saying to us, the North Pole is not where it used to be. Manifest destiny is no longer manifest. Civilization self-destructs. Nemesis is knocking at the door. So this is the beginnings of him stating his intentions. This is him setting up why he's writing what he's writing. And then he comes out and straight up says it. What are poets for in such an age? What is the use of poetry? The printing press made poetry so silent it lost its song. Make it sing again. So here he's telling us what the intention is of this, right? He's setting up for us this concept that poetry no longer is doing what it was meant to do. It lost its song. And he is expressing the opinion that we should make it sing again. Then he tells us his vision, right? So after telling us that he thinks that poetry is no longer, working within this civilization that is self-destructing, he then starts to tell us what we should do, right? He starts off by, if you would be a poet, create works capable of answering the challenge of apocalyptic times, even if this means sounding apocalyptic. He's telling us our vision, right? You are Whitman, you are Poe, you are Mark Twain, you are Emily Dickinson and Edna St. Vincent Millay. You are an American or a non-American. You can conquer the conquerors with words. That right there is his vision for what we should do. Then he starts to tell us, the actions that we could take, right? He starts to tell us that, poetry is not a sedentary occupation, not a take your seat practice. Stand up and let them have it. Have wide angle vision. Each look a world glance. And then he goes on and on. And the people, yes, all around the earth speaking babble tongues, give voice to them all. He's telling us right there, be active. Be a poet that is actually actively working to give everyone a voice. It is up to us to decide if the bird cries are cries of ecstasy or cries of despair. If we choose one or the other, he's telling us, we will know what type of poet we are. If you would be a poet, discover a new way for mortals to inhabit the earth. If you would be a poet, invent a new language anyone can understand. If you would be a poet, speak new truths that the world can't deny. And then here, continuing on, through art, create order out of the chaos of living. And he reminds us to write beyond time, reinvent the idea of truth, reinvent the idea of beauty. If you ask me, those particular lines right there are really his biggest call to action, right? Lawrence Ferlinghetti is telling us that this is how we can achieve this vision that he has for poetry, which again starts up here. He wants us to make it sing again. He wants us to have an impact in the way that poetry is used and perceived by our society. This whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
When you say like sing or whatever, you think if you think like the unity sing, he's probably even referring like harmonize.
Mm-hmm.
Is make it sing again, like make it harmonious again, to like live with each other, with the earth, with people.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, you know, if you think of every voice being a part of a choir, you know, that's kind of what he's trying to say, I think, right? That he wants us to have our own voice, and he wants us to give voice to others, give a platform to others, so that, yes, we can all be, you know, singing in harmony, right? Our poetry should have some sort of harmony to it that, you know, gives as much as it gets, right? It's sort of like this idea of reciprocity. And just like Kathy said, the prescription. This is his prescription for, you know, a better world. Tina, I saw you.
Reciprocity, what?
What's that? Reciprocity. So being reciprocal, right? Yeah.
I think the most impressive thing about this poem is that he does exactly what he's telling you to do. He makes poetry sing, and he makes it world changing, basically. Just the words. I mean, you can't help but be affected by it. Maybe not even about poetry, but about everyday life and what you do. He basically does what he's telling us to do in that poem.
Yeah, you know, I think that he's sort of like living up to what he is saying, right? In his own way. I mean, the fact that we're even just simply using the poem now, Ferlinghetti probably has no idea that I've used this poem on several occasions to teach this workshop. But, you know, his action is having an effect on us, right? And that's the same effect that I hope that your poetry has in the future. Ani, I saw that you raised your hand too.
I was just going to add that there's another side to, you know, giving people a voice. I think, you know, one of the reasons why people have their favorite songs is that because sometimes one artist can communicate those things that are inexpressible for most people. And so it's not just about giving voice to people who are not being heard, but just giving humanity a way to express itself, you know, to refine your art and take your talent and make it, put it to use for humanity, to refine thoughts, to find those words that people have trouble finding in order to express what's going on inside. That's kind of the artist's job, really, is to be able to distill those things, to actually go deep to where all those uncomfortable feelings are that nobody wants to talk about, and be the one who talks about it and puts it in a context that allows people to actually work with and, you know, heal with and all of that. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, you know, and I think that, like, sometimes that's exactly what happens with at least with music, right? It's such a popular form. People can access it in so many different ways, but, you know, the reason why people will have a favorite song, you know, is maybe because the artist is putting into words the feelings that a person can't do for themselves, right? And that's, I think, the function of a poet too. Our function is to give, I don't know, like, give language the language that it needs to express itself, if that makes sense. So yeah, ultimately, I hope that, you know, this poem does inspire you and gives you at least a sense of what is possible with poetry and how we can give everyone a voice, even if it's us speaking for them. And Abraham, like, you know, if the lawyers, you know, if Ferlinghetti's lawyers come to claim any kind of rights, I'll send them your way. And I like Mauricio's idea. Maybe we can make him a guest speaker. Yeah. So, does anyone have any questions about manifestos or anything that we've covered so far today? I don't see any hands or anything. Or maybe his children, sure.
Does it have to be like super? Does it have to be super serious, like a manifesto? Could it be like a manifesto on like? Does there always have to be like a serious tone to it?
I mean, the function of a manifesto is to call people to action. So if it's a manifesto that's meant to, I don't know, like be almost like a joke, but still call people to action, it'll still be a manifesto, you know.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, the majority of manifestos have political overtones to them. They might be artistic, but they're going to always sound political in one way or another.
Okay.
Yeah. Mauricio, you raise your hand.
I remember the term Ars Poetica. Is this related to that? Or am I confusing the two?
An Ars Poetica is a much more reflective sort of document. An Ars Poetica or an Arte Poetica is kind of like, you know, your individual relationship with your craft, with your art. Okay. Whereas a manifesto is about like bringing other people on board with you. But they both can be, you know, a form of a challenge too. You know, they can be written from that standpoint of I'm challenging you in your particular movement, you know, to I don't know, consider things in a different way.
Mm-hmm. There may be like a love of the manifesto. The same way Arte Poetica is like your relationship with poetry, your relationship with manifesto.
Yeah. You can think of it that way, yeah. The disco movement, disco manifesto. I like the whole chat that's happening right now surrounding disco. You know, get funkified. Yeah. Now, I mean, if that's the type of manifesto that you want to write, you know, disco could be a metaphor for, you know, enjoying life. So you do keep that in mind, right? Anything that you write as a poet can still be a metaphor for living. So, and that's sort of what a manifesto is. Remember, it is providing the author's life stance, right? So it can be written from the point of view of the author. In fact, it's almost always going to be written from the point of view of the author. And it's going to express either their frustrations or the things that they love about life and how to challenge people to live it the same way. So, yeah. So any last questions or comments? I'm not saying anything.
Quick
Yes.
Quick comment or question or thought. Would you consider the Declaration of Independence a manifesto?
Yes, in fact, it is a manifesto.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a declaration.
It's not the elements so that you just...
Yeah, you know, and the function of the Declaration of Independence as a manifesto is really more to outline the way in which we should govern ourselves, right? So the call to action is different in that the call to action in the Declaration of Independence is to say, like, we are rejecting your monarchy and declaring that we are, you know, a unified people that wish to live in this way. So the language is a little bit different, but it still is ultimately a manifesto. So
would it really be considered a manifesto though? Because if it says, hold on, where's your 4 things that a manifesto are? It says,
well, it states the intentions.
Offers for a new and improved world manner of living or system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
like, I think it's we the people. What starts with people? What is that?
Yeah, that's the Declaration of Independence.
That we're talking about right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, it was more we people of the law versus we the people.
Yeah.
Kind of like as if it were a manifesto, more of like a manifesto, very specific to not people in general, but certain people.
Yeah.
So I thought a manifesto was like to be inclusive. Like when he said like world views.
Yeah, it's about shifting perspectives, right? So it's the function of the Declaration of Independence is different, right? So that is it's a manifesto in that it's declaring how the United States at the time wanted to structure itself in an independent way, separate from the English monarchy, right? But it sort of fails as a manifesto in that it doesn't speak broadly to all people living in the Americas, So it and then the U.S. Constitution itself was not necessarily all inclusive always. That's why we have our amendments and stuff. A manifesto is not always going to be for everyone, right? That's why it's important to remember that it will likely say that the world will be a better place because of this, but it can also be a way to talk about a new system, right? So it's not just a new way of living, it's also a new system that we should adopt, kind of like the Developers Manifesto that Kathy brought up earlier, or the way that, like the Communist Manifesto specifically talks about a political system. So it's not always like, a world thing. It could be about systems as well. So yeah, it does have a target audience a lot of times. So that being said, your writing prompt for this week, since I think we're kind of ready for it, is to write your own manifesto. Right? Write a manifesto that unifies us under the banner of your choice, whether it be poetry, disco, food, whatever you want, but it should be, a manifesto about X, something that will unify us for a common goal. So, are there any questions there? Does anybody need me to restate it?
Is next week going to be reading from it or another lesson?
It'll be another lesson.
Okay.
Yeah. So those of you that are new or returning, but have not yet experienced the Google Classroom format of this, the writing prompt that I give you will be uploaded as an assignment, quote unquote, on the Google Classroom. That'll be where you can upload your Google Doc version or your PDF version of your writing prompt, and I'll try to give you feedback on it through there. For the remainder of the Google class, all of the handouts and the videos, they'll also be found in the assignments tab on Google Classroom. You can always go back to them at any time. You can download them, save the link for the YouTube video. This particular writing prompt, I'll state it again because it was requested in the chat. I want you to write a manifesto on whatever topic you want, but it should be a manifesto that tries to unite us as a people under the banner of whatever your manifesto's subject is. Like I said, it could be a manifesto on food, it could be a manifesto on poetry, a manifesto on disco, whatever you guys want. But it should be a manifesto that incorporates the 4 basic elements of the structure, and it can be written as a poem. It can be written as an essay. My challenge to you is to try to do it as a poem. Consider doing it as a prose poem. But definitely look at the Lawrence Ferlinghetti version, to sort of get cues of how you can do it as a poem. If you want to do it as a recipe, as Ms. Lois mentioned earlier, you could even do it as a recipe. A prose poem, to answer the question, is a poem that is written in prose. So it could have the elements of poetry, but it's written kind of like an essay. So it's like a combination of the two. If you want to sow discord, you can, but I said disco, like the music, disco. All right.
Brian, thank you.
All right. Well, you're welcome, Ms. Lois. So if there are no last questions, I will leave it there. Yeah, I mean, discord and unity kind of could go hand in hand, and that one will follow the other, but we'll kind of let you figure that out how long will. All right, so yeah, I guess that'll be it for tonight. Any questions that you might have, feel free to post them to the Google Classroom stream. I'll try to answer them. And we'll see y'all next week. So have a great night, everyone. Take care.
You too. Thank you.